The stars above Earth had always been silent. For thousands of years, humans looked up and wondered if they were alone. They built telescopes, sent radio signals into the darkness, and dreamed of the day when someone would answer back. On March 15th, 2024-7, that silence finally broke. The ships appeared at the edge of the solar system without warning. They were massive, each one larger than Earth's moon, and there were hundreds of them. They hung in space like floating cities, their surfaces smooth and gleaming with colors that seemed to shift when you looked at them. Every telescope on Earth and every human colony from Mars to the outer planets turned to watch. Within an hour, the ships sent a message. It came on every frequency humans had ever used. Radio, television, internet, even old emergency channels that nobody thought worked anymore. The message was in perfect English, and Chinese and Spanish and every other language humans spoke. The translation was flawless, as if whoever sent it had studied humanity for a very long time. People of Earth, the message began. We are the Caltherian Collective. We represent 10,000 species from across the galaxy. We have watched your species grow and develop. We have seen your art, your science, your struggles, and your triumphs. We believe you are ready. We come to offer you a place among the stars. The world stopped. Every government declared an emergency. Every news channel played the message on repeat. People flooded into the streets, some celebrating, some afraid, all of them knowing that human history had just changed forever. Ambassador Chen Yara was in her apartment in Geneva when her phone started ringing. She was 43 years old, sharp-minded, and had spent 20 years negotiating treaties between Earth's nations and the colony worlds. She had dealt with wars, trade disputes, and political crises that could have torn humanity apart. But this was different. This was bigger than anything she had ever faced. "They want you at the UN immediately," her assistant said when she answered. "You're being appointed as Earth's chief negotiator." Chen didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in 10 minutes. The United Nations building was chaos. Representatives from every nation on Earth and every human colony were gathering. Security had locked down the entire district. Chen walked through corridors filled with shouting voices and worried faces until she reached the main conference chamber. Inside, the Secretary General was waiting with the heads of state from Earth's major powers. The room was too quiet for the number of people in it. Everyone was reading the same thing on their tablets and screens. The full message from the Caltherian Collective. "They want to meet," the Secretary General said, "face to face. They've asked us to send a delegation to their flagship. They're offering us membership in their collective." Chen sat down and started reading. The message was longer than the broadcast, much longer. It outlined what the Caltherians called the Integration Protocol. It was a 500-year plan to bring humanity into galactic civilization. The promises were incredible. Advanced technology that would let humans travel faster than light. Medical treatments that could extend human life for centuries. Clean energy that would never run out. Access to libraries containing millions of years of accumulated knowledge from thousands of species, an end to hunger, disease, and poverty. Everything humanity had ever dreamed of was being offered freely. "What's the cost?" Chen asked. The Secretary General looked uncomfortable. "That's what we need you to find out." 2 days later, Chen stood in the airlock of Earth's largest space station, preparing to board a shuttle that would take her to the Caltherian flagship. She was joined by 5 other delegates: a scientist, a philosopher, a military advisor, a cultural expert, and a young translator who specialized in xenolinguistics, even though humanity had never met aliens before. The Caltherian ship that arrived to collect them was small compared to the massive vessels waiting at the edge of the system, but it was still 3 times larger than any ship humans had ever built. It was beautiful in a strange way, all smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to glow with their own light. When they boarded, The air smelled like flowers Chen had never encountered. The gravity felt slightly lighter than Earth's. The corridors were wide and tall, built for beings of many different sizes, and everything was quiet. Too quiet. Their footsteps barely made sound on the floor. A figure waited for them in what appeared to be a greeting chamber. It was humanoid, which surprised Chen. 2 arms, 2 legs, a head with 2 eyes and a mouth. But the similarities ended there. The being was tall, nearly 7 feet, with skin that had a faint blue tint and seemed to shimmer. Its eyes were too large and too dark, like pools of black water. It wore robes that moved as if underwater, despite there being no wind. "Welcome," the being said, and its voice was warm and gentle. "I am Archon Velius of the Caltharian Collective. I will be your guide and your contact for the integration protocol." It smiled, and the smile looked almost human. Almost, but not quite. Chen bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that was neutral enough for first contact. "I am Ambassador Chen Yara, representing humanity. We are honored by your presence and grateful for your offer." Velius led them deeper into the ship. As they walked, he talked about the collective. He described a civilization that spanned half the galaxy, where 10,000 different species lived in peace and prosperity. He spoke of worlds transformed from barren rocks into gardens. He described cities that floated in the clouds and others that existed beneath the seas. He painted a picture of a universe where war was ancient history and suffering was a choice no one had to make. "Why now?" Chen asked. "Why offer this to humanity now?" Velius paused at a large window that looked out at Earth, hanging blue and beautiful in the distance. "Every species reaches a threshold," he said, "a point where they can either join the galactic community or destroy themselves. You have nuclear weapons, genetic engineering, artificial intelligence. You have the tools to create paradise or to end yourselves. We intervene at this moment because it is when you need guidance most." They entered a conference chamber that was larger than any room Chen had seen on the ship. The walls displayed images of alien worlds and alien species, hundreds of them, thousands, each one labeled with a name and a date of integration. Velius gestured to the display. "All of them face the same choice you face now. All of them chose to join us. All of them are thriving." The philosopher in Chen's delegation, an old man named Dr. Kuwara, spoke up. "What about those who said no?" Velius turned to look at him. For just a moment, something flickered in those dark eyes. Then the warm smile returned. "In 10,000 years, only a handful of species have declined our offer. It is rare. Most species recognize the benefit of joining something greater than themselves." "But what happened to those who declined?" Kuwara pressed. "They chose their own path," Velius said smoothly. "We respect that choice. We quarantine their systems to allow them to develop without interference." Chen made a mental note. Quarantine. An interesting word choice. They spent 6 hours in that chamber as Velius explained the integration protocol in detail. It was complex and thorough. The first 100 years would focus on technology transfer and economic integration. Humans would adopt collective currency and join collective trade networks. The second 100 years would involve cultural exchange, with human children learning alongside alien children in mixed schools. The third 100 years would see political integration, with Earth becoming a member world in the collective's governance structure. By the 500th year, Velius explained, humanity would be fully integrated. They would be equal members of the collective, indistinguishable from any other species in terms of rights and status. Chen's military advisor, Colonel Zhang, asked the question Chen was thinking. "What about our sovereignty? Our right to govern ourselves?" "You retain all autonomy," Velius assured them. "The collective does not impose rule. We offer guidance and structure. You remain free to make your own choices within the framework we provide." When the meeting ended, Chen and her team returned to their shuttle. No one spoke until they were back in human space, on the station, in a secured room that was swept for listening devices. "It's everything we ever wanted," the scientist said quietly. "Everything we've been working toward for centuries." "It's a trap," Colonel Zhang said flatly. "How can you say that?" the scientist shot back. "They're offering us the stars." Chen held up her hand for silence. "We have 72 hours before we need to give them an answer. I want every word of that integration protocol analyzed. I want historical experts looking at what happened to species that joined. And I want to know what happened to the ones who said no." Dr. Kawara nodded slowly. "I noticed something. Did you see the images on the walls? 10,000 species, all of them very different physically, but their cities, their art, it all looked similar, too similar." Chen had noticed that too. She had also noticed something else. When Velius talked about the declined species, he had used the word quarantine, not protected or left alone. Quarantine. The word you used for diseases. Over the next 3 days, humanity worked faster than it ever had before. Every AI system, every analytical mind, every historian and philosopher and scientist was put to work examining the Caltherian offer. What they found was disturbing. The integration protocol was designed to smooth away differences. The economic integration meant adopting collective systems that had been refined over millennia. Human innovation would be unnecessary. The cultural exchange meant human children would learn to think like collective members. Human uniqueness would fade. The political integration meant human voices would be a tiny fraction of a vast government where conformity was rewarded and deviation was discouraged. A young xenoanthropologist named Sarah Kim found something even more disturbing. She dug into the historical records the Caltherians had provided about species joining the collective. She noticed gaps in the timeline. 47 species had existed in the regions the collective controlled. Only 41 were listed as members. 6 were missing. She requested information about those 6 species. The Caltherian response was vague. They had declined integration and chosen isolation. They were under quarantine for their own protection. Sarah pushed harder. She asked to speak with them or see their worlds. The Caltherians refused. It would violate the quarantine protocol. It would interfere with their development. Sarah brought her findings to Chen. "I think they're lying," she said. "I think those species either don't exist anymore or they're prisoners. And I think there are more than 6. The records only go back a few thousand years. The collective is older than that." Chen called an emergency session of every human government. The debate lasted 18 hours. Some argued that even if the collective wasn't perfect, the technology was worth it. Others said that surrendering humanity's independence was too high a price. The vote was close, but the result was clear. 67% of humanity chose to decline the offer. Chen requested one final meeting with Archon Velius. This time, she didn't go to his ship. She insisted he come to the UN building on Earth. She wanted this conversation to happen on human soil, broadcast across every human channel and sent to the Caltherian fleet. Velius arrived alone, which surprised Chen. He seemed confident, as if he already knew humanity would accept. They met in the General Assembly Hall, with representatives from every human nation and colony present. Cameras recorded everything. Chen stood at the podium and looked directly at Velius. "We have examined your offer with great care," she began. Her voice was steady and clear. "We are grateful for it. We understand that you believe you are offering us a kindness, but we have learned something about ourselves across our long and difficult history." She paused, letting the moment stretch. Every human alive was watching. Humanity values the right to fail on our own terms more than we value guaranteed success on someone else's terms. We value our differences, our conflicts, our struggles. They are what make us human. Your integration protocol would smooth us away over time. We would become just another species in your collective. Thinking your thoughts, following your ways, we would cease to be who we are. Velia started to speak, but Chen raised her hand. We are declining your offer, and we are issuing a warning. One warning given once, and never repeated. Her voice grew harder. Do not return with better offers. Do not interfere with our development. Do not quarantine us. Do not observe us. Do not contact us again. Leave human space, and do not come back. Velius's face showed shock for the first time. You don't understand what you're refusing. You'll destroy yourselves within a century. Your species will tear itself apart without our guidance. Perhaps, Chen said, that is our choice to make, our risk to take, our future to build or burn. She leaned forward slightly. But if you ignore this warning, if you breach this boundary we are setting, you will discover something about humanity that you missed in all your years of observation. You will learn why we are the only species on our planet that survived our own evolution. You will learn what makes humanity different. She let silence fill the hall. And you will learn it the hard way. Velia stood frozen. No species had ever spoken to the collective this way. No species had ever refused and then issued demands. He didn't know how to respond. Chen gave a signal. All around the world and across every human colony, something happened simultaneously. Every ship turned away from the Caltherian fleet. Every telescope pointed away. Every communication channel closed. Every defense station activated, not aggressively, but as a clear statement. Humanity turned its back and went back to work. Chen looked at Velius one last time. You should leave now. The Archon left without another word. The Caltherian fleet lingered at the edge of the solar system for 3 days. Then finally they departed. In his private chambers on the flagship, Velius made a note in the official collective records. Species designation, humanity, status, declined integration, assessment, primitive species with developmental delays. Recommendation, return in 50 years to reevaluate readiness. He believed humanity would be begging for their help within a generation. He was wrong. 50 years passed quickly for a civilization that had chosen its own path. For humanity, those 5 decades were the most turbulent and transformative in their history. Without the Caltherian collective to lean on, humans had to solve their own problems. It was messy, difficult, and sometimes painful, but it was theirs. The first 10 years after the collective left were the hardest. Some people remained angry about the decision. They had seen paradise offered and watched their leaders refuse it. Protests erupted in major cities. A small colony on Europa even tried to declare independence, hoping to contact the Caltherians on their own. The Earth government had to intervene carefully, not with force, but with patience and dialogue. Dr. Kuwara, the philosopher who had been part of the original delegation, spent those years traveling and speaking. He was old now, his hair completely white, his movements slow, but his mind was sharp, and people listened when he talked. We didn't refuse paradise, he would say at every gathering. We refuse the death of what makes us human. Yes, we struggle. Yes, we fail. But we also create. We grow. We become something new. The Caltherians wanted to give us answers. We chose to keep asking questions. Slowly, the anger faded. Humanity got back to work. The science teams focused on developing faster than light travel. They knew it was possible because the Caltherians had it, but humans had to figure it out themselves. Thousands of researchers worked on the problem. There were setbacks and failures. 3 experimental ships were lost with all hands. Each time, humanity mourned, learned, and kept trying. 22 years after the Caltherians left, a ship called the Pioneer successfully jumped to Alpha Centauri and back. The trip took 6 weeks instead of the centuries it would have taken with conventional drives. It wasn't as fast as Caltherian technology. Their ships could cross the same distance in hours. But the human drive worked, and it was based on principles humans had discovered themselves. The celebration lasted for days across every human world. With FTL travel unlocked, humanity spread faster than anyone had predicted. Colony ships departed Earth at a rate of 3 or 4 per year. Some went to nearby stars humans had studied for centuries. Others ventured farther, looking for new worlds and new opportunities. The colonies were as different as the people who founded them. New Beijing on Proxima Centauri b became a gleaming city of towers and artificial intelligence. Where efficiency and progress were the highest values, New Amish on Ross 128b rejected advanced technology almost entirely, building farming communities that looked like they came from Earth's 19th century Freeport. Orbiting Tau Ceti became a wild trading hub where laws were minimal and anything could be bought or sold. Earth's government tried to maintain unity, but it was like holding water in a net. The colonies were too far away and too independent. Eventually, humanity accepted what it had always been: diverse, argumentative, and impossible to control completely. A loose confederation replaced the old government structure. Each world could govern itself however it wanted, as long as it respected basic rights and participated in mutual defense. Not everyone agreed with this arrangement. There were arguments and tensions, but compared to the collective's enforced conformity, humanity's chaos felt right. On the 40th anniversary of First Contact, Ambassador Chen Yara gave her final public speech. She was 93 years old, still sharp-minded but physically frail. She spoke from the same UN chamber where she had refused the Caltherians. "We were told we would destroy ourselves," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "We were told we needed guidance. Instead, we stumbled forward on our own. Yes, we made mistakes. Yes, we suffered. But we're still here. We're still human. We're still free." She smiled. That's worth any cost. She died 6 years later, knowing she had helped save humanity from a comfortable cage. In the 47th year after First Contact, something unexpected happened. A human exploration ship encountered aliens. Not the Caltherians, but a different species entirely. They called themselves the Varani. They were small, barely 4 feet tall, with 6 arms and skin covered in patterns that changed color with their emotions. They came from a star system about 80 light years from Earth. When the human ship approached, broadcasting peaceful intentions, the Varani responded with curiosity rather than fear. The first meeting was awkward. Both species were trying to communicate without a common language. But slowly, with patience and creativity, they began to understand each other. The Varani were traders and explorers, traveling between stars in ships that were old but reliable. They had never heard of the Caltherian collective. This fascinated the humans. Were there aliens in the galaxy who existed completely outside the collective's influence? The Varani confirmed it. The galaxy was vast, and the collective only controlled a portion of it. There were thousands of other species, some in their own collectives or empires, others independent like the Varani. The humans and Varani established a trade relationship. The Varani wanted human entertainment media, music and stories and games. They found human culture endlessly interesting because it was so diverse. Humans wanted Varani navigation data and information about other species. It was a fair exchange, and neither side tried to dominate the other. More contacts followed. Humanity met the Threxians, a warrior species that respected strength. They met the Quilora, a species of philosophers who lived in vast space habitats. They met the Shen, who were traders like the Varani, but more aggressive in their business practices. Each contact was different. Some became allies. Some became rivals. None of them tried to assimilate humanity into a collective. The galaxy, humans discovered, was much more complicated than the Caltherians had made it seem. On the 50th anniversary of First Contact, Dr. Sarah Kim, the xenoanthropologist who had first discovered the collective's lies, was working at a research station on Mars. She was 68 years old now, and she ran the Solar Institute for Xenological Studies. Her team monitored alien communications, studied alien cultures, and advised Earth's government on diplomatic matters. One morning, her assistant rushed into her office with an alert. Long-range sensors had detected something at the edge of the solar system, multiple FTL signatures. Big ones. Sarah's blood ran cold. She knew what this was before the confirmation came through. The Caltherians were back. Within hours, every human government received the same message. It was from Archon Velius, and he sounded tired. "People of Earth," the message began. 50 years ago, you chose to refuse our offer. We respected that decision and gave you time to develop on your own. We return now to see how you have progressed. We hope that you have reconsidered. We are prepared to renew our offer of integration into the collective. The message was polite, but something about it felt wrong. Sarah listened to it 3 times, analyzing every word. "He sounds surprised," she said to her assistant. "He expected to find us struggling. He expected us to beg for help." She was right. On the Caltherian flagship, Velius stood before a display showing the human solar system. He was shocked by what he saw. 50 years ago, humanity had been confined to their own solar system with a few struggling colonies on Mars and the moons of Jupiter. Now, human settlements dotted 20 different star systems. Ships moved between them constantly, carrying trade and people. The hulls were crude compared to collective ships, and the FTL drives were inefficient. But they worked, and there were hundreds of them. Worse, the sensors detected alien signatures that weren't Caltherian. Other species were in human space, trading and communicating freely. Humanity had made contact with aliens and established relationships without collective oversight. This wasn't supposed to happen. Species that refused integration were supposed to stagnate or destroy themselves. They weren't supposed to thrive. Velius composed himself and sent the prepared message. Then he waited for humanity's reply. The reply came from the Confederation's main council. It was short. "Archon Velius, 50 years ago, we issued a warning. We told you not to return. We told you to leave us alone. You have violated that warning. You must leave human space immediately." Velius read the message in disbelief. They were ordering him to leave? They were treating the Caltherian collective like an unwanted guest? He composed a response, making his tone gentle and reasonable. "We mean no harm. We simply wish to check on your progress and renew our offer. Surely 50 years is enough time for you to realize that you need guidance. Your technology is crude. Your society is fractured. You spread across the stars without proper planning or structure. Let us help you before you make mistakes that cannot be undone." The human response was faster this time, and it came with an attached file. The file contained detailed records of human progress over the past 50 years, new technologies developed, new colonies founded, new species contacted, peace maintained despite differences. It was a comprehensive report that showed humanity doing exactly what they said they would do, surviving and growing on their own terms. The message itself was simple. We do not need your help. We do not want your help. Leave now. Velius felt frustration building. Why couldn't they see? He activated his ship's communication system and broadcast directly to Earth, bypassing official channels. "I am trying to help you," he said, and his voice carried genuine concern. "I have watched 10,000 species join the collective. I have seen the mistakes that young species make when they develop too quickly without guidance. You are heading toward disaster. Your culture is too diverse, too chaotic. You will tear yourselves apart. Please let us help you before it's too late." On Earth, in the Confederation Council chamber, the representatives watched Velius's plea. Some of them felt sympathy. He seemed to genuinely believe he was helping. Sarah Kim, present as an advisor, shook her head. He's not trying to help us. He's trying to help himself. The collective can't accept that we succeeded without them. It breaks their entire worldview. The council voted unanimously. They sent a final message to Velius. You have been warned 3 times now. Once 50 years ago, when we told you never to return. Once when you arrived and we told you to leave once just now. There will be no 4th warning. If you do not leave human space within 24 hours, we will consider your presence a hostile act. Velius should have left. The collective's own protocols said that species who refused integration should be left alone, but Velius couldn't accept it. He had spent 50 years believing humanity would fail. He had imagined returning to find them desperate and grateful. Instead, they were thriving and ordering him away. He made a decision that would change everything. There was a human colony on Mars that was struggling. A blight had damaged their crops, and they were facing a difficult winter. It wasn't a crisis. They had called for supplies from Earth, and ships were already on the way. But it was enough of a problem that Velius could justify what he was about to do. He sent a small ship to Mars orbit. It broadcast an offer directly to the colonists, advanced agricultural technology that would solve their crop problems permanently, free of charge. No strings attached, just humanitarian aid. The Mars colony government contacted Earth immediately. The Confederation's response was instant and clear. Refuse all contact with the Caltherians, accept nothing from them. But Velius had counted on human nature. Not everyone in the colony agreed with Earth's decision 50 years ago. Some people thought humanity had made a mistake. When Velius's ship began descending toward the colony's main agricultural zone, a group of colonists opened a landing bay. They thought they were just accepting technology. They thought they were helping their neighbors survive a hard winter. They didn't realize they were starting a war. 3 human defense ships intercepted Velius's vessel before it could land. They broadcasted on all frequencies, ordering the Caltherian ship to withdraw. They warned that any attempt to make contact with the colony would be considered a hostile act. Velius, on the Caltherian flagship, watched in real time. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. They were going to stop him from delivering aid? They were going to let their own people suffer rather than accept help? He gave the order. The small ship activated what the collective called pacification protocols. They were non-lethal systems designed to disable primitive vessels without harming the crew. The weapons were precise and safe, refined over thousands of years of peacefully managing less advanced species. The 3 human ships should have gone dark. Their systems should have shut down, leaving them floating helplessly until they could be towed to safety. Instead, the human ships opened fire. The weapons were crude by collective standards. Railguns that hurled chunks of metal at relativistic speeds, missiles with nuclear warheads, lasers that were inefficient and short-ranged. But they were fired by crews who were angry, determined, and who had trained for this exact scenario. The Caltherian ship's shields held at first, then a railgun slug punched through, then another. Missiles detonated against the hull, tearing open sections of the ship. The lasers burned through armor that had never been designed to withstand sustained attack. Velius watched in horror as the small ship broke apart. The crew barely had time to evacuate. 17 Caltherians made it to escape pods. 6 didn't. It was the first time in 10,000 years that anyone had destroyed a collective vessel. The 3 human ships were damaged. 2 of them severely, but they had achieved their objective. The Caltherian ship was debris, and the escape pods were being collected by human rescue vessels. Velius sat in his command chamber, staring at the displays. Around him, his crew was silent, shocked. Someone had fought back. Someone had destroyed a collective ship. It wasn't supposed to be possible. On Earth in the Confederation Council, Sarah Kim stood and addressed the chamber. "They know now," she said quietly. "They know that we meant every word of our warning. The question is, What will they do about it? The answer came faster than anyone expected. At the edge of human space, 50 Caltherian warships emerged from FTL. The fleet had been waiting just outside the system, ready to provide support if needed. Now they were coming in, and they weren't broadcasting messages of peace. Humanity had one day to prepare for war against an empire that had never lost. The Caltherian fleet moved through space with the confidence of a civilization that had never known defeat. 50 warships, each one a masterpiece of technology refined over thousands of years. Their shields could withstand the blast of a star. Their weapons could turn planets into glass. They had come to teach humanity a lesson about rejecting the collective's kindness. Admiral Marcus Okonkwo watched the approaching fleet from the bridge of the UHSS Defiance, humanity's largest warship. He was 61 years old, a career military officer who had fought in the brief war between Earth and the Mars independence movement 30 years ago. He had trained for this moment, even though he never truly believed it would come. Around the solar system, every human military vessel was moving into position. There were 234 ships total. Most were small patrol craft and system defense boats. Only 47 were proper warships, and even those were tiny compared to the Caltherian vessels. The disparity was obvious to everyone. Human technology was 50 years old, developed without alien help. Caltherian technology was 10,000 years old, perfected across millions of battles. In every measurable way, humanity was outmatched. Incoming transmission from the Caltherian fleet, the communications officer reported. Okonkwo nodded. Put it through. Archon Velius appeared on the main screen. He looked tired and sad, like a parent forced to discipline a child. Admiral Okonkwo, Velius said, somehow knowing exactly who he was addressing. What happened at Mars was a tragedy. Your people destroyed a vessel on a humanitarian mission. 6 Caltherians died. This cannot stand without response. Okonkwo kept his expression neutral. You violated our territorial space after being warned not to. You attempted to interfere with one of our colonies. The response was proportional to the threat. We were delivering aid. Velius's voice rose slightly. We were trying to help people who were suffering. We didn't ask for your help, Okonkwo replied. We told you to leave. You refused. Actions have consequences even for the Caltherian collective. Velius was silent for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was heavy with resignation. I am authorized to accept your surrender. Disarm your vessels, stand down your defense systems, and submit to collective authority. We will occupy your major population centers temporarily while we begin the integration protocol. There will be no further bloodshed if you comply now. Okonkwo almost laughed. You think we're going to surrender? You have no choice, Velius said. Look at your sensors. We have 50 warships. You have 47. Ours are superior in every way. You cannot win this fight. Please do not throw away lives for pride. Okonkwo leaned forward in his chair. Archon Velius, let me tell you something about humans. We've been fighting for our entire existence. We fought the planet we evolved on. We fought the diseases that tried to kill us. We fought each other in 1,000 wars. We learned something from all that fighting. Victory isn't about having better weapons, it's about being willing to pay the price to win. That's barbaric, Velius said quietly. Maybe, Okonkwo agreed, but it's kept us alive. You have one chance to avoid what comes next. Turn your fleet around and leave human space. Don't come back. Velius closed his eyes briefly. I cannot. The collective has made its decision. You will be integrated by force if necessary, for your own good. Then, Okonkwo said, you're going to learn something new today. He cut the transmission and turned to his crew. All ships, Battle Formation Delta 7, execute immediately. The human fleet scattered. It wasn't a retreat. It was a tactical repositioning that the Caltherians had never seen before. Instead of forming a defensive line, The human ships split into small groups of 3 or 4 vessels each. They dove in different directions, using the orbits of planets and moons for cover. On the Caltherian flagship, tactical officers watched in confusion. "They're breaking formation," one reported. "No coordination. They're fleeing in random directions." Velius studied the tactical display. Something felt wrong. "Where is their flagship?" The officers searched their sensors. The Defiance had disappeared into the shadow of Jupiter, along with 20 other human ships. "It doesn't matter," Velius decided. "Divide our fleet. Pursuit groups of 5 ships each. Disable their vessels and force them to surrender minimal casualties." The Caltherian fleet split up, each group chasing after a cluster of human ships. It was exactly what Okonkwo had wanted them to do. The first engagement happened near Earth's moon. 5 Caltherian warships cornered 3 human frigates. The Caltherians broadcast surrender demands. The human ships responded by firing every weapon they had and ramming. 2 of the human ships were destroyed. The third was crippled. But they had damaged 2 Caltherian vessels, badly enough that they had to withdraw from the battle. The remaining 3 Caltherian ships continued their pursuit of other human vessels, but they were more cautious now. Near Mars, another engagement played out differently. 4 human ships were being chased by 5 Caltherian vessels. The humans led them into a debris field left over from old mining operations. When the Caltherians followed, the humans detonated nuclear mines hidden in the debris. The explosion didn't destroy the Caltherian ships, but it scattered the fleet and damaged their sensors. The human ships turned and attacked in the confusion. 1 Caltherian ship was destroyed. The others retreated to regroup. Near Venus, the pattern repeated. Human ships would engage, inflict damage even at the cost of their own destruction, and make the Caltherians pay for every inch of space. Velius watched the reports coming in with growing alarm. The humans were fighting like cornered animals. They accepted casualties that should have broken their morale. When a human ship was crippled, the crew would often set the reactor to overload and try to ram the nearest Caltherian vessel. "They're insane," one of his officers whispered. "They're committed," Velius corrected, but he was shaken. In 10,000 years, the collective had never faced an enemy that fought this way. There were rules to warfare. There were conventions. You surrendered when defeat was certain to preserve lives for later. You didn't throw yourself into oblivion for tactical advantage. Humans apparently didn't follow those rules. The battle continued for 6 hours. By the end, 40 human ships had been destroyed or disabled. Another 60 were damaged. But the Caltherian fleet had lost 7 ships destroyed and 18 damaged severely enough that they had to withdraw from combat. For an empire that measured losses in thousands of years, losing 7 ships in 6 hours was catastrophic. Velius called a temporary halt to the offensive. His fleet regrouped at the edge of the solar system while he tried to understand what had happened. "Calculate their remaining military capacity," he ordered. The tactical report was grim. Humanity still had 134 combat-capable ships. They were damaged and low on ammunition, but they were still fighting. "How long until our reinforcements arrive?" Velius asked. 3 days, an officer reported. Another 20 ships from the nearest collective outpost. 3 days. Velius looked at the tactical display showing human defensive positions. They had pulled back to form a tighter perimeter around Earth and Mars. They were consolidating, preparing for the next assault. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Okonkwo was receiving damage reports. His ship had taken hits during the fighting. 2 of its 4 main railguns were destroyed. The port shield generator was offline. They were down to 60% combat effectiveness. "Status of the fleet?" he asked. 134 ships still operational," his tactical officer reported. "But ammunition is low across the board. Missiles at 40%, railgun slugs at 30%. We have enough for maybe 2 more engagements before we're reduced to lasers only." Okonkwo studied the plot showing Caltharian positions. They were hanging back, regrouping, probably waiting for reinforcements. They expected us to break, his executive officer said quietly. They expected us to surrender after the first hour. They don't understand us, Okonkwo replied. They've spent 10,000 years dealing with species that think like them. We don't think like them. Dr. Sarah Kim's face appeared on a communication screen. She was broadcasting from the Confederation Council on Earth. Admiral, we're receiving reports from our scouts. Caltharian reinforcements are en route. 20 additional ships arriving in approximately 70 hours. Okonkwo nodded. I saw the projection. That will give them a 2-to-1 numerical advantage, and their ships are still individually superior. Can we hold? Sarah asked. It was the question everyone wanted answered. Okonkwo was silent for a moment, running calculations in his head. If the Caltharians attacked with everything they had, accepting casualties like humans did, they could overwhelm Earth's defenses in a day. But they wouldn't do that. They still thought like the collective. They would try to minimize losses, follow proper tactical doctrine, fight a clean war. That was humanity's only advantage. We can hold, Okonkwo said, but it's going to cost us. We need to make them pay for every ship, every hour, every inch of space. Eventually, they'll decide we're not worth the price. And if they don't? Sarah asked. Okonkwo didn't answer. He didn't need to. If the Caltharians committed fully, if they were willing to accept massive casualties, they would win, Earth would burn. Humanity would be forced into the integration protocol at gunpoint. But Okonkwo was betting that the collective couldn't make that commitment. An empire that hadn't lost a ship in 10,000 years couldn't suddenly accept losing 50 more. It would break something fundamental in how they saw themselves. All ships, he broadcast across the fleet. 60 hours until the second wave arrives. Repair what you can. Resupply from the depots. Rest if you can. When they come again, we show them the same thing we showed them today. Humans don't surrender. Across the fleet, damaged ships limped toward repair stations. Crews worked around the clock, fixing weapons and patching hulls. Medical stations were overwhelmed with wounded. The death toll from the first engagement was climbing toward 12,000. On Earth, the Confederation Council debated their options. Some representatives argued for negotiation. Maybe they could find a compromise, some way to satisfy the Caltharians without surrendering completely. Others argued for total commitment. This was an existential fight. If they gave the collective any opening, any crack in humanity's resolve, it would all be over. Sarah Kim listened to the debate for hours before finally speaking up. We're thinking about this wrong, she said. We're treating this like a normal war, where two sides fight until one surrenders. But this isn't a normal war. The Caltharians aren't trying to conquer us. They're trying to save us from ourselves. She gestured to the data displayed on the Council's main screen. Look at their tactics. They're trying to disable our ships, not destroy them. They're broadcasting surrender demands every few minutes. They want us to submit because they genuinely believe they're helping us. How does that help us? One representative asked. Because, Sarah explained, they can't accept that helping us means leaving us alone. Their entire civilization is built on the idea that integration into the collective is good for everyone. We're breaking that idea just by existing and thriving. Every hour we hold out, every ship we destroy, we're proving them wrong. Another representative shook his head. But they can still destroy us. Yes, Sarah agreed. But only if they're willing to abandon everything they believe about themselves. They would have to admit that they're not benevolent guides. They're conquerors. That's not a small thing for a civilization that has spent 10,000 years believing their own propaganda. The Council voted to continue fighting. No surrender, no negotiation. Humanity would stand or fall on its own terms. In his quarters on the Defiance, Admiral Okonkwo allowed himself 1 hour of rest. He lay on his bunk, eyes closed, thinking about his daughter. She was on Earth, working as a doctor in Lagos. He had spoken to her briefly before the battle started. "Come home safe, Dad," she had said. "I will," he had promised, knowing it might be a lie. He thought about Ambassador Chen, dead now for 4 years. She would have understood what they were doing. She had issued the first warning. Okonkwo was enforcing it. His alarm woke him after an hour. He returned to the bridge where his crew was waiting. "Status?" he asked. "Repairs at 60%. Ammunition resupply from Earth and Mars proceeding. Fleet morale is holding." Okonkwo looked at the tactical display. The Caltharian fleet hadn't moved. They were still waiting at the edge of the system, probably arguing among themselves about what to do next. "Do you think they'll come again?" his executive officer asked. "Yes," Okonkwo said. "They have to. If they leave now, it means we won. It means a primitive species beat the mighty collective. They can't accept that." "But we didn't win," the officer pointed out. "We lost 40 ships. They lost 7. Okonkwo smiled grimly. "We're still here. We're still fighting. For the collective, that's the same as losing." On the Caltharian flagship, Velius was having the same realization. He stood before his senior officers, all of them experienced commanders who had served the collective for centuries. "We can't leave," one officer said. "If we withdraw now, every other species we've integrated will hear about it. Some might start questioning the collective's authority." "But we can't sustain these losses," another argued. 7 ships destroyed in 6 hours? That's more than we've lost in the last millennium. If this continues, we could lose the entire fleet." Velius listened to them argue, feeling the weight of command pressing down on him. He had made the decision to intervene at Mars. He had started this chain of events. Now he had to see it through. "We continue," he said finally. "When reinforcements arrive, we will attack with overwhelming force. We will break their defenses and occupy Earth. We will save humanity from itself, whether they want us to or not." The officers looked uncertain, but they nodded acceptance. Velius returned to his quarters and stared at the data files on humanity. 50 years ago, they had been so simple. A species on the edge of space, struggling with their own nature. He had truly believed he was helping them. Now he didn't know what to believe. Humans had technology they shouldn't have developed without guidance. They had allies among alien species the collective had never even contacted. They fought with a desperation that seemed suicidal, but was somehow effective. He thought about Ambassador Chen's warning from 50 years ago. "You will learn what makes humanity different, and you will learn it the hard way." He was learning, and she had been right about the hard way. In 70 hours, the reinforcements would arrive. Then the real battle would begin. Velius tried to convince himself that it would be quick, that humanity would finally see reason and surrender. But deep down, he knew better. Humans didn't surrender. They didn't follow the rules. They didn't think like any other species in the galaxy, and that made them the most dangerous enemy the collective had ever faced. The reinforcements arrived exactly when predicted. 20 Caltharian warships emerged from FTL at the edge of the solar system, their hulls gleaming and their weapons fully charged. They joined the existing fleet, bringing the total force to 63 combat-ready vessels. It was the largest military force the collective had assembled in 3,000 years. Archon Velius called a fleet-wide conference. The holographic images of his ship commanders appeared in a circle around him, each one representing centuries of experience and thousands of successful integrations. "This ends today," Velius announced. "We will advance on Earth in 3 waves. First wave disables orbital defenses. Second wave suppresses surface-to-space weapons. Third wave lands occupation forces in major cities. Resistance will be met with the minimum force necessary to ensure compliance." "What about the human fleet?" one commander asked. "They will attempt to intercept us. When they do, we engage and disable. Our objective is not destruction. It is pacification. Remember, these are the people we came to help. Every human death is a failure of our mission." The commanders acknowledged their orders, but Velius could see doubt in their expressions. The first battle had shaken them. The collective's forces weren't supposed to take casualties. War was supposed to be clean and surgical, over quickly once the inferior side recognized reality. Humanity had refused to recognize reality. On Earth, Admiral Okonkwo received the latest intelligence reports. His fleet was as ready as it would ever be. Repairs had restored most ships to 70 or 80% functionality. Ammunition had been restocked, though they were drawing down the last reserves. There would be no more resupply after this battle. "They're moving," his tactical officer reported. "All 63 ships advancing in formation. Speed is conservative. They're taking their time." Okonkwo studied the plot. The Caltherian formation was textbook perfect. 3 waves properly spaced, with clear command structure and support vessels positioned for maximum efficiency. It was how you fought a war when you had overwhelming superiority and wanted to minimize risk. It was also predictable. "Send the fleet order," Okonkwo commanded. "Formation Omega, execute immediately." His executive officer looked surprised. "Sir, Omega formation will split us across the entire inner system. We'll have no concentrated firepower." "That's the point," Okonkwo replied. "They want a clean, organized battle. We're going to give them chaos." The human fleet scattered again, but this time with more purpose. Small groups of ships positioned themselves throughout the inner solar system, using planets, moons, and asteroid fields for cover. They weren't defending any single point. They were everywhere and nowhere. Velius watched the human deployment with frustration. "They're not forming a defensive line. What are they doing?" His tactical officer highlighted multiple locations on the display. "They've positioned forces near Earth, Mars, Venus, and throughout the asteroid belt, small groups widely dispersed. If we advance on Earth, we leave our flanks exposed. Then we'll sweep the entire system," Velius decided. "First wave breaks into 6 groups. Each group eliminates human forces in their sector, then converges on Earth second, and third waves hold position to provide support." It was a sound strategy against a conventional enemy, but humanity wasn't conventional. The first Caltherian group, 10 ships strong, advanced on the human position near Venus. 5 human frigates were waiting in orbit around the planet. As the Caltherians approached, the human ships powered up their weapons and broadcast a message. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the UHSS Valiant. You are ordered to withdraw from human space immediately. This is your final warning." The Caltherian commander almost laughed. 5 frigates against 10 warships. "This is Collective Fleet Commander Suresh. Power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. You will not be harmed if you comply." The human response was to fire every weapon they had. The battle was short and brutal. The 5 human frigates focused their fire on a single Caltherian ship, overwhelming its shields through pure volume of fire. The ship's hull cracked open, venting atmosphere and crew. The other 9 Caltherian ships retaliated, and within minutes, all 5 human frigates were disabled or destroyed. But the Caltherians had lost a ship, and 3 more were damaged. Commander Suresh reported to Velius with confusion in his voice. "They could have retreated. They could have surrendered. Why did they fight?" "Because they're human," Velius replied quietly. "Continue to the next position." The pattern repeated across the solar system. Near Mars, 6 human ships destroyed 2 Caltherian vessels before being wiped out. In the asteroid belt, human forces used the rocks for cover, launching ambushes that damaged Caltherian ships before being hunted down and eliminated. Every engagement followed the same pattern. The humans lost. They always lost. But they made the Caltherians bleed for every victory. Okonkwo watched the reports from the bridge of the Defiance. His ship was positioned near Earth with 40 other vessels, the core of humanity's remaining defense. They had held back from the initial skirmishes, waiting. "Casualty report?" he asked. 63 ships destroyed or disabled in the outer system. Estimated 14,000 dead. His officer's voice was hollow. Okonkwo closed his eyes briefly. 14,000 people gone, each one with families, dreams, lives. He had ordered them to die, and they had obeyed. "And Caltharian losses?" 11 ships destroyed, 28 damaged to varying degrees. They're regrouping before the final push on Earth. The ratio was terrible. Humanity was losing nearly 6 ships for every Caltharian vessel destroyed. In any conventional war, those numbers would mean total defeat. But this wasn't about numbers. It was about will. "How long until they advance on Earth?" Okonkwo asked. 6 hours. They're repairing damage and redistributing forces." 6 hours. Okonkwo used the time to walk through his ship, speaking to the crew. They were exhausted, many of them injured. But he saw no despair in their eyes. They knew what they were fighting for. In the ship's medical bay, he found a young pilot who had crash-landed after her ship was destroyed. She was being treated for burns and broken bones. "We held them off, didn't we, sir?" she asked through pain medication. "We did," Okonkwo confirmed. "You did good work out there." "My whole squadron is gone," she said. "But we took 2 of them with us. That's good, right? We made them pay?" Okonkwo squeezed her hand gently. "You made them pay. Rest now." He continued his walk, stopping to speak with engineers, gunners, officers. Each conversation was brief, but important. These people needed to know their sacrifice mattered. On the Caltharian flagship, Velius was having a very different conversation with his commanders. "We've lost 11 ships," one commander stated flatly, "in less than 12 hours of combat. This is unsustainable." "We have 52 ships remaining," another argued. "They have less than 70. We still have overwhelming superiority." "But at what cost?" The first commander gestured at the casualty reports. "We've lost over 4,000 collective citizens. 4,000! The entire collective will hear about this. They'll ask why we're fighting a war of extermination against a species we claimed to want to help." Velius felt the weight of command crushing him. "This is not a war of extermination. We are using minimum force to—" "Minimum force?" the commander interrupted, something that never happened in collective military culture. "Admiral, we've destroyed over 100 human ships. We've killed tens of thousands of them. How is this minimum force?" "They keep fighting," Velius's voice rose. "Every time we offer surrender, they attack. Every time we try to show restraint, they exploit it. What would you have us do?" The conference chamber fell silent. Finally, the youngest commander spoke. She was only 200 years old, relatively inexperienced. "Perhaps," she said carefully, "we should consider that we were wrong to come here." The other commanders stared at her. Velius felt something cold in his chest. "Explain," he said. "The humans warned us not to return. We ignored that warning. They warned us not to interfere at Mars. We ignored that warning too. They told us they would fight, and we didn't believe them. Every step of this, we have been wrong about what humans would do." She paused. "Maybe we're wrong about this entire mission." "We are bringing them into civilization," another commander protested. "We are saving them from themselves." "Are we?" The young commander pulled up historical data. In the 50 years since we left, they developed FTL travel. They established colonies. They made peaceful contact with multiple species. They built a functioning interstellar civilization. Where is the failure we predicted? Velius wanted to argue, but the data was irrefutable. Humanity had succeeded without the collective. Worse, they had succeeded in ways the collective never anticipated. Their technology was different, their society was chaotic, their culture was fragmented. By every collective metric, they should have collapsed. But they hadn't. "It doesn't matter now," Velius said finally. "We've committed to this course. We cannot withdraw without completing the mission. To do so would be to admit that the collective made a mistake that is unacceptable." The commanders nodded, but Velius could see doubt in their eyes. The final assault on Earth began 6 hours later. 52 Caltherian ships advanced in a wall of overwhelming firepower. The human defense fleet of 71 ships rose to meet them. The battle was joined halfway between Earth and the Moon. This time, the humans didn't scatter. They formed a defensive sphere around Earth, layered in depth, with overlapping fields of fire. The Caltherians had to go through them to reach the planet. "All ships," Okonkwo broadcast. "This is our last stand. Make it count." The two fleets collided like ancient armies. Ships on both sides opened fire at maximum range. Space filled with missiles, railgun slugs, and laser beams. Shields flared and failed. Hulls ruptured. Ships died. The Defiance took the center of the human formation. Its remaining railguns hammered at a Caltherian heavy cruiser, finally punching through its shields. A dozen human ships concentrated fire on the wounded vessel until it broke apart. But the cost was terrible. 5 human ships were destroyed in that exchange. 3 more were crippled and had to withdraw. Okonkwo gripped his command chair as the ship shook from impacts. "Status? Shields at 40% and falling. 2 more railguns offline. Hull breaches on decks 7 through 9. "Keep firing!" The battle raged for 3 hours. It was nothing like the clean, surgical warfare the collective practiced. It was brutal, desperate, and costly. Both sides took horrible losses. Okonkwo watched his fleet shrink on the tactical display. 71 ships became 60, then 50, then 40. Each ship that died took hundreds of crew with it. The death toll was climbing into the tens of thousands. But the Caltherians were dying too. Their formation, so perfect at the start, had broken apart under sustained assault. Ships that were supposed to support each other were isolated and destroyed. The collective's superior technology couldn't compensate for humanity's willingness to trade lives for kills. When the Defiance's shields finally failed, Okonkwo knew the end was near. Enemy fire tore into the ship's hull. Secondary explosions rippled through the corridors. The bridge was filled with smoke and the sound of alarms. "Evacuate non-essential personnel," Okonkwo ordered. "Engineering, how long can you keep the reactor stable?" 20 minutes, maybe 30, the chief engineer replied. Okonkwo looked at his executive officer. "Get to the escape pods. That's an order." "Sir, I dash. Go, all of you. I need volunteers to stay at the weapon stations. Anyone who wants to live, leave now." Half the bridge crew rushed for the exits. The other half stayed at their posts. Okonkwo turned the dying ship toward the nearest Caltherian vessel. "Give me everything the weapons have left, and someone override the reactor safeties." The Defiance, crippled and burning, accelerated toward a Caltherian cruiser. The enemy ship tried to evade, but the Defiance's remaining weapons crippled its engines. The two ships collided at high velocity. The reactor containment failed a moment later. The explosion was visible from Earth, a new star that briefly outshone the sun. On the Caltherian flagship, Velius watched the battle with growing horror. 23 more ships destroyed. 23! The human fleet was down to just 18 vessels, but they were still fighting, still clawing at his forces with everything they had. "Fleet order," he transmitted, his voice hollow. "All ships, withdraw to minimum safe distance. Cease offensive operations." "Admiral?" his tactical officer questioned. "We've won," Velius said. "We've destroyed most of their fleet, but we've lost." He couldn't finish the sentence. 34 ships. Over 11,000 collective citizens dead. The surviving human ships didn't pursue. They formed a battered defensive line around Earth and waited. Velius stared at Earth on his displays. The planet was helpless now. He could bombard it into submission. He could land occupation forces. He could complete the mission. But the cost would be every remaining ship in his fleet. The humans would fight on the ground as fiercely as they fought in space. Every city would be a battle. Every street would run with blood. And for what? To help a species that didn't want help? To save people who would rather die than be saved? Velius thought about Ambassador Chen's warning, 50 years old but suddenly very real. You will learn what makes humanity different, and you will learn it the hard way. He had learned. Humans fought without hope of victory because victory wasn't the point. Survival was. Freedom was. Choosing their own path was. The collective had spent 10,000 years believing that civilization meant cooperation, peace, and rational decision-making. Humans had spent their entire existence proving that survival sometimes meant violence, sacrifice, and irrational determination. "Open a channel to Earth," Velius ordered quietly. When the line connected, he found himself facing a woman he recognized from the old records, Dr. Sarah Kim, one of the original analysts who had warned against accepting the collective's offer. "Dr. Kim," Velius said, "I wish to discuss terms." Sarah's face was hard. "The only terms we'll accept are your immediate withdrawal from human space and a promise never to return." "We've lost 34 ships," Velius said. "You've lost over 100. Your military is broken. Why won't you surrender?" "Because we're human," Sarah replied. "We don't surrender. We don't submit. You can kill us, but you can't make us join you." Velius closed his eyes. "I understand that now. What I don't understand is why you're willing to die for it." "Would you give up being Caltherian?" Sarah asked. "Would you abandon everything that makes your species unique just because someone offered you something easier?" "The collective preserves uniqueness. You homogenize it," Sarah interrupted. "You smooth away differences until everything looks the same. We've seen your records. 10,000 species, all with remarkably similar art, similar philosophy, similar politics. That's not preservation. That's assimilation." Velius wanted to argue, but he couldn't. He had been to 1,000 integrated worlds. She was right. They all felt similar. He had always thought that was because they had achieved enlightenment. Now he wondered if it was because they had lost something essential. "If we withdraw," Velius said carefully, "will humanity leave us alone?" "If you leave us alone," Sarah replied, "we'll have no reason to bother you. We never wanted conflict. We just wanted to be left alone." The collective will hear about this defeat. Some may question whether integration is truly beneficial. "Good," Sarah said. "Maybe some of them will choose freedom." Velius looked at his tactical display one more time. 18 human ships remained, all damaged, low on ammunition, barely functional. One more assault would finish them. But his fleet was broken too, and he finally understood that humans would keep fighting until every last person was dead. There would be no surrender, no integration, only death. "Very well," Velius said. "We will withdraw. But I must warn you, the collective is vast. Others may come after us." "Let them come," Sarah replied. "We'll give them the same warning we gave you, and if they ignore it, they'll learn the same lesson." The Caltherian fleet began its withdrawal 6 hours later. The surviving human ships escorted them to the edge of the solar system, weapons armed, making sure they actually left. When the last Caltherian ship jumped to FTL, a cheer went up across every human world. They had won. They had paid a terrible price, but they had won.